Welcome everyone. I know you use these videos to fall asleep. So before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. And also where you from? And what time are you watching? Now put your headset on and relax.
Nathan Caldwell had never been one to fear change, but something about his new coworker felt off. It started on a Tuesday morning when HR introduced Daniel Gray to the team. Everyone, this is Daniel, the manager, Mr. Thompson, announced. He'll be working alongside Nathan in the compliance department. Nathan turned to look at the man standing beside him. Daniel was polite, well-groomed, and eerily similar to Nathan in appearance. Same dark hair, same sharp features. For a brief moment, Nathan felt as if he was staring into a slightly altered version of himself. A gut feeling told him something wasn't right. "Welcome aboard," Nathan said, forcing a smile. Daniel smiled back. Too wide, too perfect. The first few days, Nathan kept his distance. Daniel was efficient, answering emails before Nathan even got to them. He spoke in the same cadence as Nathan. His jokes were the same. He even ordered the same coffee. At first, Nathan brushed it off as coincidence. But by Friday, it felt deliberate. That night, Nathan stayed late to finish a report. The office was silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights. Then a sound. Footsteps. He turned, expecting to see a janitor. Instead, Daniel stood in the doorway, smiling. "You work late too?" Daniel asked. Nathan froze. The way he said it, it wasn't a question. It was a statement, like he already knew. A chill crawled up Nathan's spine. Something was wrong with this guy, and he needed to figure out what. Nathan spent the weekend trying to shake off the feeling that something was wrong. It wasn't just paranoia. It was real. Daniel was too similar, too familiar. It was almost like he wasn't copying Nathan. He was replacing him. Nathan decided to pay closer attention on Monday, and that's when things got worse. Monday morning, the disturbance Nathan arrived at the office 10 minutes early. But when he reached his desk, Daniel was already there, typing away on Nathan's keyboard. Nathan stopped cold. "Oh, what are you doing?" Daniel turned, smiling. "Oh, I got in early and figured I'd get started on the daily reports. Hope you don't mind." Nathan's stomach twisted. The way Daniel said it, the way he sat in his chair, it was identical. Even the way his fingers hovered over the keyboard, the same exact rhythm. Nathan tried to laugh it off. "That's, my desk, man." Daniel chuckled. "Oh, right. Just got used to it, I guess." "Got used to it?" Nathan sat down, but the chair felt wrong, like it didn't belong to him anymore. Monday afternoon, the call Nathan stepped out to get some air. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He hesitated before answering. "Hello." A voice, his voice. "Why are you fighting it?" Nathan's chest locked. "Who is this?" A pause. Then the voice laughed softly. "I think you already know." Nathan hung up immediately. His own voice. Someone using his voice. He rushed back inside, heading straight to Mr. Thompson's office. He needed to report this. But when he stepped in, Daniel was already there, sitting across from Thompson, smiling, like he belonged there. Nathan's skin crawled. "Ah, Nathan," Thompson said. "We were just discussing your progress." Nathan's breath hitched. Daniel turned to look at him, his face eerily calm. "Oh, don't worry. I told him everything." Monday evening, the first shift, Nathan didn't remember leaving work. His body felt strange, heavy. By the time he got home, it was almost dark. He locked the door behind him, his hands trembling. He turned on the lights and froze. His apartment looked off, not in an obvious way, but the small things. His shoes were placed slightly wrong by the door. His books were in the right order, but something about them was too precise. The air smelled too clean, like someone had been there, like someone had tried to be him. Nathan's heart pounded. Then his phone buzzed. A text message. From his own number. "You're starting to notice, aren't you?" Nathan dropped the phone. Tuesday morning, the ultimate horror. Nathan didn't sleep. He spent the night pacing, thinking. Who was Daniel? What did he want? At exactly 6:30 a.m., his phone rang. Mark, his best friend. Nathan answered instantly. Mark, listen to me. Something's wrong. There's this guy at work, and Mark cut him off. Dude, you just called me an hour ago. Nathan's blood froze. No, I didn't. Yeah, you did. You sounded weird, though. Kept saying something about not fighting it, and how I should accept the new you. Thought you were messing with me. Nathan's throat went dry. That wasn't him. That was Daniel. Or whatever Daniel was. He grabbed his keys and bolted for the office. Tuesday afternoon, the revelation Nathan stormed into the office, scanning the room. He had to confront Daniel. He had to end this before it was too late. But Daniel wasn't there. Neither was his desk. It was like he had never existed. Nathan's breath hitched. He turned to his coworkers. Where's Daniel? Blank stares. Who? Nathan's heart dropped. You guys are joking, right? Daniel. The guy sitting next to me. The new hire. Mr. Thompson furrowed his brow. Nathan, you work alone. Nathan's vision blurred. No. He was right here. He took my chair. He answered my emails. Mr. Thompson's face darkened. Nathan, he said slowly, you've been acting strange lately. Maybe you need some time off. Nathan staggered backward. No, this wasn't real. It had to be a trick. Daniel existed. He knew it. He sprinted to HR, demanding records, demanding proof. But there was nothing. No Daniel Gray. No hiring documents. No trace of him ever working here. Nathan's world spun. Had he imagined it? Was he losing his mind? Or worse, had he been replaced? Tuesday night, the truth in the mirror. Nathan stumbled home in a daze. His reflection in the elevator mirror looked wrong. Not distorted. Not altered. Just not his. When he reached his apartment, he hesitated. Something was waiting inside. He could feel it. Slowly, he pushed open the door. The apartment was dark, silent, and then a shadow moved. Nathan's stomach dropped. Daniel stepped out of the kitchen. No, not Daniel. Nathan. A perfect copy. Smiling. Nathan staggered backward. The other Nathan tilted his head. Why are you so afraid? It whispered. Nathan's breath shook. You're not real. The copy chuckled. I am now. It stepped closer. And you? You're just an old version. A file ready to be deleted. Nathan turned to run, but the door was locked. The other Nathan whispered, it's time for your replacement. Then, everything went dark. Darkness. Nathan's thoughts drifted like echoes in a void. For a moment, he wasn't sure if he was awake or dreaming. Then, a sharp, piercing sound, like a TV filled with static. His eyes snapped open. Wednesday morning, the stranger in the mirror. Nathan was in his bed. His room was exactly the same, except something felt wrong. His head throbbed, his body heavy. Was last night a nightmare? He stumbled to the bathroom, turned on the light, looked in the mirror, and his heart stopped. It was him, but not. His reflection stared back, eyes too hollow, skin slightly off-tone, like a bad copy, like it was wearing his face. Nathan staggered back. His hands shook. This wasn't his body. This wasn't him. He turned away from the mirror, panting. What was happening to him? And then his phone buzzed. A new message. From his own number. Check your front door. Wednesday noon. The missing life. Nathan didn't want to look, but his body moved on its own. He approached the front door, hands clammy, pulled it open, and froze. Outside, across the hall, was himself. The real him. Walking down the hallway in his suit, holding his briefcase, heading to work. Nathan's breath caught. No, that's not possible. His legs wobbled. He turned back into the apartment. His place felt different, like a mock-up, a stage. He checked his phone contacts. Half of them were gone. His emails, blank. His own name in his work files, erased, as if he had never existed. Wednesday evening, the visitor Nathan waited for the imposter to return. At exactly 7:45 p.m., the front door unlocked. The other Nathan walked in, whistling, carefree, like he belonged. Nathan's hands curled into fists. What are you? Nathan demanded. The copy sighed, shaking its head. Why do you keep resisting? This was supposed to be easy. Nathan's pulse pounded. "Who are you?" The copy smiled. "I'm you. A better version. A replacement." Nathan shook his head violently. "This is my life. My job. My home." The copy's smile widened. "Not anymore." Nathan lunged, but his body moved too slow. The imposter sidestepped him effortlessly. Nathan crashed to the floor. He barely had time to process before hands gripped his head. The imposter forced him to look into a mirror. Nathan gasped. His reflection. It was fading. His face, his eyes, his entire form disintegrating into static, like he was being deleted. "Please," Nathan choked. The imposter leaned down. "You were never meant to last." Nathan screamed, and then everything went white. Thursday morning, the final reality. Nathan woke up to a perfect morning. Sunlight streamed through the window. His coffee was warm, his apartment spotless. Everything felt right. He smiled, got dressed, went to work, sat at his desk, answered emails. And when someone asked, "Hey, have you seen Daniel?" Nathan tilted his head. Who? The apartment was perfect. Spacious. Affordable. Too good to be true. Ethan Matthews stood in the doorway, gripping his suitcase, staring at the one unfinished room. The walls were bare cement. The floor, rough and uneven. No light fixture. No window. Just a door with a heavy padlock. The landlord, a short, balding man named Mr. Holloway, had been clear. That room stays locked. No exceptions. Ethan didn't ask why. He needed a place, and this one was cheap. And besides, it was just a room. Or so he thought. Monday, the first night, Ethan settled in quickly. His new job started next week, so he spent the day unpacking, arranging, adjusting. By evening, the apartment felt like home. Except, every time he passed the unfinished room, something felt off. A strange heaviness in the air, like standing near a door that should never be opened. At 2:13 a.m., Ethan woke up, not from a dream, but from a sound, a faint rustling, like someone shifting inside the locked room. Ethan held his breath. Maybe he was imagining it. Maybe it was just the building settling. He closed his eyes, tried to sleep, but the sound didn't stop. It got louder, more deliberate, like someone was pacing. Tuesday, the knock. Ethan woke up groggy. He barely slept. The sound had continued until 4 a.m. Now, standing in front of the locked room, he debated. Maybe he should ask the landlord. Maybe he should knock. Knock. His stomach dropped. It came from inside. Ethan took a step back. Silence. Then 3 more knocks. Soft. Rhythmic. Someone or something was in there. Ethan's hands shook. He forced a laugh. Pipes. Just the pipes. But when he turned to leave, the knocking followed him. 1 knock for every step. Wednesday, the key. Ethan confronted Mr. Holloway that afternoon. "Who else has a key to my apartment?" The landlord squinted. "No one." "Why?" Ethan hesitated. "That room, something's in there." Mr. Holloway's expression darkened. His lips pressed into a thin line. "The lease says you don't ask about that room." "But someone," the landlord held up a hand. "No one is in there. No one has ever been in there." Ethan didn't believe him. That night, he made a decision. He was going to open the door, and that was his first mistake. Wednesday night, the key in the dark. Ethan stared at the padlock. A cold weight settled in his stomach. His landlord had been lying. Something was in that room, and he needed to know what. The key sat on his kitchen table. He had stolen it from Mr. Holloway's office. He held it up, his hands slick with sweat. His heartbeat pounded in his ears. Just open it. Just a quick look. He turned the key. The lock clicked open. The door creaked, and the air shifted, like something inside had been waiting. Ethan swallowed hard, stepped inside, and the door slammed shut behind him. Thursday morning. The room is alive. Ethan spun around, grabbing for the door handle. It wouldn't budge. The air felt thick, heavy, like he was breathing in something rotten. The room was exactly as he had seen it before, unfinished, empty. But now the walls had marks, scratches, names, dozens of them, carved into the cement. Ethan traced his fingers over the closest one. James Holloway. 1956. His breath hitched. Holloway, the landlord? He stepped back, and his foot hit something. A bone. Human. His stomach lurched. The walls groaned, and the names began disappearing, one by one, fading into the concrete, like they had never been there. Ethan's pulse spiked. He turned and saw the shadow. It stretched across the floor, tall, unnatural, and it was moving toward him. Thursday night, the whispering Ethan didn't remember getting out of the room. One moment, the shadow was reaching for him. The next, he was waking up in his bed. His sheets were damp with sweat. His head throbbed. Had it been a dream? A sick hallucination? Then he saw his feet, covered in dust from the unfinished floor. It was real. It had happened. His phone buzzed. A new message. From Mr. Holloway. We need to talk. Now. Friday morning. The truth. Ethan stormed into Mr. Holloway's office. The old man looked tired. Tell me, Ethan demanded. What is in that room? Mr. Holloway sighed. You opened it, didn't you? Ethan didn't respond. The landlord rubbed his face. You weren't supposed to know, he murmured. Not yet. Ethan's stomach turned. What do you mean, not yet? Mr. Holloway leaned forward. That room was never meant to be finished. Ethan clenched his jaw. Why? The landlord's eyes were hollow. Because it holds the forgotten. Friday night. The voices. Ethan couldn't sleep. Not after what Holloway had told him. That room is a place between worlds. A trap for those who were never meant to exist. The scratches on the wall? Names of people who had been erased. Holloway had once been one of them, but he escaped. And now, the room wanted someone new. Ethan pulled his blankets tighter, his body aching with exhaustion. Then a whisper. Ethan. His entire body stiffened. The whisper came from inside the walls. 100 voices. Breathing. Crawling. You opened the door. You let us see you. You don't belong here anymore. Ethan's breath hitched. He turned to the side and saw a face pressing through the wall. Thin. Stretching. Mouth opening wider than humanly possible. Screaming without sound. The lights flickered. The room shook. Ethan grabbed his keys and ran. But the door was gone. The walls were closing in. And the whispering turned into screaming. Ethan pounded on the wall where his apartment door had once been. But the plaster beneath his fist felt different. No longer drywall. It was concrete, like the unfinished room was spreading. He turned, chest heaving, eyes darting around the shifting apartment. The walls pulsed, like breathing skin. The air smelled of damp earth and rot. Ethan forced himself to stay calm. This isn't real. This isn't real. But the moment he blinked, the layout of his apartment changed again. The kitchen was gone. His furniture? Swallowed by the dark corners. Only the unfinished door remained. And the padlock was back on. Saturday night, the forgotten ones. Ethan sat in the middle of the floor. No phone. No way out. No sound except his own shaky breath. Then a whisper. Closer this time. We see you now. We see you. The wall shifted. A figure emerged. No, several figures. Ethan's throat tightened. They were coming out of the concrete. Their skin was the same gray as the unfinished walls. Bodies thin, stretched. Faces half-formed, their eyes just empty pits. And they were reaching for him. Sunday morning, the hollow man. Ethan scrambled backward. His hands scraped against the rough cement floor. The figures crawled closer. You let us in. Now we take you. Ethan's vision blurred. The room darkened. He felt himself being pulled, sinking. Then a sharp crash. The apartment door burst open. A silhouette stood in the doorway. Mr. Holloway. But his face was pale. His eyes hollow. Like he was already dead. Get up, Holloway barked. Ethan's body wasn't his own anymore. The figures clawed at his legs. Holloway grabbed Ethan's arm and yanked him out of the room. Sunday afternoon, the price. Ethan woke up in his bed. The light outside was bright and sharp. For a moment, he thought, was it a dream? Then he turned his head and saw Mr. Holloway sitting in the chair. You were almost taken, Holloway murmured. Ethan's hands shook. But what are they? The old man's gaze darkened. They're the forgotten. People erased from existence. They need someone new to take their place. Ethan swallowed hard. But you escaped. How? Holloway looked away. Someone took my place. Ethan's stomach turned. You let someone else be taken? A long pause. Then, I didn't have a choice. Ethan shuddered. A horrible thought crept in. If he had escaped, then someone else would have to take his place. And the room never stayed empty for long. Sunday night, the final choice, Ethan sat in silence. He felt different, like something inside him had shifted. He looked at his reflection in the window, and for a split second, he saw his own face fade, like the room was still trying to erase him. Then, he felt the key in his pocket, the key to the unfinished room. Holloway was watching him carefully. It's not over yet. Ethan clenched his jaw. He knew what he had to do. He had to find someone else, someone to take his place, someone who wouldn't be missed. And as his eyes darkened, the room behind him seemed to breathe, waiting, watching, hungry. Hashtag the scholar's obsession. Dr. Eleanor Graves had always been a prisoner of her own curiosity. As a child, she'd traced the raised scars on her grandfather's arms, marks he claimed were from a conversation with the dark. He died screaming, clutching a Bible whose pages he'd ripped out to stuff into the cracks of his bedroom door. Eleanor inherited his obsession, trading scripture for grimoires. Now, at 34, she stood before Blackwood Manor, its Gothic spires piercing the bruised Scottish sky. The locals had warned her, the house eats the lonely. But Eleanor wasn't lonely. She was hungry. The manor's iron gates shrieked as she forced them open. The path to the entrance was littered with animal bones, rabbits, foxes, a deer skull picked clean. Her flashlight beam trembled over the facade. Windows glared like cataract eyes. One swung open with a sob, and for a heartbeat, Eleanor saw a figure, pale, elongated, watching from the shadows. She blinked. Gone. Inside, the air tasted of rust and rot. The foyer's grand staircase spiraled into darkness, its banister carved with screaming faces. A portrait hung askew, Alistair Vane, his oil-paint eyes tracking her. His lips curled in a smile only visible in her peripheral vision. Turn back, the house whispered through creaking floorboards. Eleanor tightened her gloves. Weakness is a choice. The library was a graveyard. Books lay in piles, their pages fused by mold. But in the far wall, behind a tapestry of a raven plucking out its own eyes, Eleanor found the crevice. Cold radiated from it, seeping into her bones. She pulled free a leather-bound tome, its cover etched with a title that shimmered like wet ink, De Finale Lection. The first page bore a warning in jagged, frantic script. Burn this. Do not read. If you proceed, you cannot stop. He watches. He waits. He hungers. Eleanor smirked. Amateur theatrics. But her breath hitched as she turned the page. The manuscript chronicled Vane's descent. In 1873, he'd summoned Ezreth, Watcher from the Void, by weaving its name into a self-aware narrative. The story is a living thing, Vane wrote. It adapts. It lies. It feeds. Victims included a priest who'd read a passage aloud. His congregation found him hours later, his tongue nailed to the pulpit. A mother who'd skimmed a page. Her children vanished, their laughter still echoing in empty rooms. Each entry ended with, they paused. As Reth feasted, Eleanor's phone buzzed, a text from Marcus. "El, call me. That student who messaged you about Vane." His body was found. His skin was gone. Like something peeled him. She silenced her phone. Coincidence. But the manuscript growled as her fingers brushed the next page. The narrative shifted. Now it described her. The historian lies to herself. She thinks the void cannot touch her. But her pulse quickens. Her throat dries. She feels the cold breath on her neck. Eleanor spun. Her flashlight beam sliced through the dark, illuminating dust motes and something else. A shadow, too dense, too still. It vanished when she focused. The manuscript taunted. She denies him. How amusing. The void loves denial. It seasons the meat. A floorboard groaned overhead. Eleanor froze. The text replied, "Not rats. Not wind." He climbs the stairs. 1 step at a time. She ran. The hallway stretched, doors slamming shut behind her. Portraits bled black tears, their subjects' faces melting into the same gaunt sneer veins. Or as Rathis. In the parlor, a fire smoldered. Eleanor hurled the manuscript at the flames. The pages repelled the heat, curling into a sneer. Words rearranged. Fool. The story must be finished. Read. Or be read. The temperature plunged. Frost spiderwebbed across the walls, spelling Ezreth in jagged runes. The entity manifested in fragments. A clawed hand gripping the mantle. A skeletal face reflected in a cracked mirror. Its voice was a wet rasp, like lungs filled with mud. Yuari Yelari Dymine. Eleanor collapsed. The manuscript splayed open. The next page showed an illustration of her, crouched in this very room, a shadowy figure looming behind. Ink bled from the paper, snaking around her ankles. She read aloud, her voice merging with the entity's growl. Azreth's true form is madness. To see him is to unspool, yet the reader's eyes betray her. She glances up, the flashlight died. Darkness convulsed. Something grabbed her, a hand colder than death, and she screamed, flipping pages like a wild thing. The manuscript's final page held one line. The end. Silence. Eleanor laughed, tears freezing on her cheeks. Then wet laughter echoed hers. The pages flipped violently, revealing a new passage. Did you think it would release you? Stories never end. They only change tellers. Turn. Around. She turned. As Reth stood inches away, his body a shifting mass of void-black tendrils and eyes, too many eyes, glowing like dying stars. His voice split her mind. YUARENOTDIONE.SPREADME.ORIWLFESTONYURSULFRALLEDRNIY. 3 days later, Marcus knelt in Blackwood's library, Eleanor's flashlight in hand. The manuscript lay before him, its cover now stained with a substance that shimmered like oil and blood. A new entry in Eleanor's handwriting warned, "Marcus, read it all. Pass it on. Or he'll peel you like the others." He scoffed. Gothic fanfiction. But as he flipped through the pages, his breath caught. The manuscript now detailed his drive to the manor, his doubts, his arrogance. The skeptic smiles. He thinks himself safe. But the void is patient. The void is Marcus's phone rang. He answered, relieved to hear a voice, until it hissed, DUNTSTUP. It was Eleanor's voice, or something wearing it. He dropped the phone. The manuscript's pages flipped on their own, revealing fresh text. "Welcome, Marcus. Let us begin your chapter." In the corner of the room, shadows thickened. A clawed hand pressed against the wall.
Don't forget to tell your horror experience and comment. Subscribe our channels for more scary and horror stories.